we have Joe Hutson.
Hiya, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to try and shove 2 bits in, but the first one's short. It's just a paragraph. I obviously went and walked around my little bit of the grid like everyone else, and this is just me walking around it. It's a bit from the book. Mine was called G123 on the map. Cartographical square G123 defies direct vehicular access. Instead, you must park below the square and make your way round to its northern edge, which happens to be the southernmost road of a housing estate. This is Waterside Road, one of the sad, slightly curvy ones that go on for too long as spoke-like cul-de-sacs emanate from its sides, filling the mid-distance vertical eye line with functional obliques and so eliminating the possibility of any horizons at all. The buildings have the look of things built on a budget in an ungenerous time, still naively existing, weathering invariable days, long after the incentives for their creation have been forgotten. Later, on the way back, we repeatedly think we must have missed the turning to our escape path, despite the fact that we still had a fair kilometre to go. But there's so much of it that goes on so unchangingly, we figure we must have deleted our memories of it in the short time it took us to return. Things appear near to each other in the absence of a meaningful alternative, rather than as the result of any kind of cohesion. There is a sense of huddling, but into oneself rather than together, any togetherness either incidental or duress motivated, like the captives of some historical ethnic cleanse, entwined uncomprehending in the cold metal belly of a totalitarian truck. Out here, beyond the close quarters of the town centre, the fact of individual domiciles being terraced seems genuinely cruel. Cruel in the sense of the unnecessary, the arbitrarily encumbered. Walking through the estate, I learned that unequivocal vinyl signs demanding in full caps that there are no ball games are sad in a totally different way to the ones that ask people to please not litter. Because where the latter draw attention to the willful contravention of the exact rule they preach, the former just draws attention to the fact that no one's playing any games in the first place. And what's more red-faced and pitiful than an empty capitalized prohibition nailed to the side of your house? So that's just a paragraph from the book. But also I like that Iain was talking about English otherness, and the idea in the book is these things have all kind of been finding their jars. So that's one that made its way out of the jar. But there's something that I don't know where it's meant to go. Just hiding in a file, like a digital jar on my computer, unanchored from, I don't know, like purpose or anything really, that I kind of want to read. There's a 600-word sentence that makes up most of it. So top marks to me if I manage to read it in a way which is comprehensible, and top marks to anyone who manages to follow along. All right, let me just find it. 2 seconds. Okay, here we go. Since things had stopped being just dread, waiting, and random moments of reprieve, had instead started getting a bit fun, with little doors popping up, small lit up stick figures mid-jog above them, and the word exit again and again in glowing green, like an invitation repeated, Susie had gotten her then young self seriously into those 2 perennial human activities, namely fornication and conflict, or, to her mind, fucking and fighting, and found herself to be really quite good at them too. Her problem thenceforth at school and interviews, according to disapproving older women, social workers and so on, being that she turned out to be pretty much shit enough at the many supplementary competencies generally seem to be required of a functional individual during the day-to-day of what some have taken to calling higher civilization. Examples of these competencies given by Susie's detractors, including time management, impulse control, cultural sensitivity, being a team player, decorum, drive, work ethic, ethics, natural concern for the well-being of others, and so on and so on. So it was that Susie found herself with a tough build to play, her stats in all the wrong place from the get-go, more suited to, say, night raids over forgotten tundras or the elaborate self-indulgence of a cherished concubine than paying attention in maths, saying no to drugs, not rising to stepdad 2, practicing ideal customer service, conducting spot check risk assessments of personal behavioral habits, maintaining a stable public image in a time of online identities and social media, repeatedly moving stock from one place to another for hours on end, or or alternatively, swiping those same products as they ride constantly along a conveyor belt towards her, and bleep monotonous as she twists their codes under the sinister ruby slit of the scanner, and for it not to be deemed reasonable for her to then respond to the largely rude, mainly impatient, often aloof beneficiaries of this drudgery with a minimum of verbal barbs, lyrical idiosyncrasies, occasional downing of tools, intentional neglect, and physical chastisement, all for it to be considered so apparently unacceptable for her to, a mere once, in response to a floor supervisor so pettily male, so uncompromisingly tyrannical and uptight from his minor elevation in the hierarchy, that he would insist on not only a second but a third pass of minutely rearranging chocolate milk cartons for optimal customer user experience and shop floor presentation, for her to then decide all at once to crash at athletic speeds 6 full pints of chocolate milk encased in not entirely soft plastic against his sub-middle managerial cheek, so that she might watch as the ripe brown lactic mist entirely sluices this whole portion of the aisle, undeniably disrupting the shop floor presentation of the perfectly arranged remaining chocolate milk boxes and all other saleable goods within 6 feet, and all people and managers too, and watch as people stop with their trolleys and look up, suddenly aware and listening as everyone in the aisle stops talking at once, so that all that can be heard is the supermarket's piped-in radio over the tannoy and a depleted carton's payload dripping in wet slaps from the sodden ends of a polyester blue supervisor's uniform into a puddle on the faded white of the shop floor, and more so to watch the gaping mouths of people now hesitantly standing at stationary trolleys, and on the face of a surprised and frightened and more absurd than ever looking manager as they all process that the kind of moment they until recently believed they inhabited has abruptly and yes violently suddenly shifted, that they currently stand in a moment for which they were not prepared, which they hadn't even remotely suspected, and now here is a young woman in uniform with her arm outstretched and her eyes wide and a grin wrapped around her face, and there is a small man beside her covered in brown liquid and holding his hands to his head and whimpering, and just a moment ago a bang and a splat, and now everyone stands around silent with their shoulders hunched because they can all feel that the rules they all assumed and felt so secure within just a moment ago have changed, that they no longer know exactly where these rules stand, and for the very near future, while Susie stands there with that grin on her face and her arm at full length, none of them can possibly know how far they might go or how far she'll take them. Only Susie knows that.
That is quite a sentence. So yeah, fantastic. And wow, what a sentence to read, and to read so well. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Joe.